Hi, everybody. Welcome to BC Wine Grape Council third Thursday presentation for March. Happy almost spring. Today we have a safety-related presentation on emergency preparedness. We will have Reg Stewart from AgSafe. And to start off, we have Ken Nickel from the BC Ag Council. And so welcome, guys, and take it away, Ken.
Okay, so just checking, you're seeing my introductory screen right now? Yes, okay, thank you. So first, I just want to thank Wine Grapes for hosting this session and for inviting us in. We greatly appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. And yeah, we'll be presenting some information on preparing for emergencies in agriculture. I'm Ken Nickel. I work for the BC Ag Council. I am delivering a project that's actually been initiated by a number of our members, including the Interior Hort Group. So first of all, there's two things I have to do. One is deliver a message from the BC Ag Council, which is that they gratefully acknowledge the financial support of the province of BC through the Ministry of Agriculture. And the second thing is that the government of BC and Investment Agriculture are, while they're pleased to participate in this project, they want you to be aware that the opinions expressed in this presentation are those of the presenter, myself, and not necessarily those of either Investment Agriculture or the government of BC. So quick land acknowledgement. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we're gathering wherever we are on the traditional ancestral territory of many First Nation peoples. And these are peoples who have hunted and worked on this land for generations. So for today's presentation, I've given you the welcome and introductions. I'm going to be speaking about BCAC's Emergency Preparedness Project really briefly, and then give you the background on BC's emergency management system. And this is important because in BC, when an emergency hits, many of you are likely going to be leaders, whether that's for your sector or for the area you live in, or even for your farm if you have more than just yourself working on that. So you're going to be leading, and it's important to know the context that you're leading in. And then Reg will talk about AgSafe, and he'll bring these preparedness kind of actions and thinking right down to the farm level. And then after that, we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers if there's still time. So the BC Ag Council, most of you will know this, but they're an umbrella organization that represents most of the farm groups in BC. Together, we represent 20,000 farming families and 96% of the farm gate sales in BC. So for an introduction, as I mentioned, we're going to be moving quickly from the very highest level right down to the farm level. And the whole point is to help you to get the tools to be prepared in advance. And the reason for that is when we have been talking to producer groups and what have you, what's become really clear is that emergencies trigger confusion at the first step. And you all know this because it's a human reaction to an emergency. And whether that's an emergency that happens instantly, like you blow a tire on the freeway, or it's something that happens more gradually, like a drought or a killing frost event. You always go through the same stages. The first stage is what just happened. The next stage is what am I going to do about it? And the third stage is basically what do I need to do first? How do I act? So if you've done planning in advance, you can get through that confusion stage a lot quicker. And because you've already thought about this in advance and you say, okay, I've got a plan for this, whatever that might be. And then if you've done any preparation work in advance, then you're ready to start implementing that plan. You don't have to go to town to buy a generator for your facilities or what have you. You've already done that. And so you're ready for whatever event might strike. So with our project, and I'll speak to that first, with our project, we had some money available to us through the province. We got some key groups together to talk about what are the things that the industry needs in terms of getting ready for emergencies. And so when we sat down with the initial group, and most of them were the animal agriculture groups, we wanted to get a lay of the land. What's the current situation? And these are the things that the industry identified as being sort of the current factors in the environment. We're getting more emergencies all the time, emergencies that impact agriculture, that demand a response from farmers. So there's more emergencies happening all the time. When those emergencies happen, farms have unique needs that are different from another business that's located in town or another rural residential property that doesn't have animals or doesn't have a farm. And so the farmers' needs are unique. And when these emergencies happen, collaboration is really important and we need more of it in advance. And the fourth thing that we noticed right away is that those local governments who set up their emergency operations centers, if they have somebody inside who's specifically focused on agriculture, and we call them agriculture coordinators, if there's somebody like that in the EOC, things go better for agriculture, and they also go better for the local government. So these ag coordinators are really important. And as Reg said, he served as that in that role many times in different EOCs or emergency operations centers. And the fifth thing, and this is from an animal agriculture perspective, relocating those animals isn't the only answer. But when there is an emergency and there is an evacuation order, the sixth thing, farmers often do need to get back in, whether it's for a short time or a little bit more extended time, to do some critical activities that keep that farm going in the long run. So whether that's looking after animals, moving your irrigation equipment, tending to your processing facility, whatever it is, there are reasons why a farmer might want to get back into their farm during an evacuation stage. So as we talk to local governments and farmers who have been through emergencies in the past, this is what we've seen quite often. There's an emergency event, something happens, a flood, a fire, whatever. There's an emergency event, and the local government jumps up, acts by putting in place an emergency operations center. And one of the things they often do is they evacuate people from an area because it's dangerous to be there. So they put in place an evacuation order. That often leads to confusion, especially on the farm. And again, that first stage where you're going, what just happened? What does this mean to me? What do I have to do about it? So you get that into that confusion stage. Then you often run into conflict and confrontation. And this happens because the local government has said that area is dangerous. They want everybody out. A farmer says, yeah, but I've got things I need to do on the farm. And so they want to stay in or get back in. And so you've almost got an automatic initial opportunity for conflict and confrontation. But what we've seen over time is that where you have a lot of emergency events or one event that goes a long time, eventually you get to the point where local governments and farmers are talking, they're considering each other's needs and interests. And then you finally get to the green boxes, which is the sweet spot, where the two are actually working together at a common problem. They're cooperating and they have confidence in each other. And so that's basically what our project is trying to promote, is getting through that top line quickly during an emergency and getting down to that bottom line where everybody is benefiting. So our project is tackling three main areas. The first one was developing an emergency plan for BCAC to lead the whole industry. The second thing was developing some tools and resources for local governments so that they can better support agriculture during an emergency. And the third one was just helping farmers themselves to increase their preparedness and the resilience of their farms and ranches. So real quick, action number one, the emergency plan. The plan is in place and it basically covers emergencies that affect a lot of different commodity groups and over multiple regions. And so BCAC is now prepared to provide a coordination role when you have these really big emergency events. The second one, tools and resources for local governments. We identified two that we wanted to work on. One was to help develop these agriculture coordinator people so that they're ready to support local governments during emergencies. And the second one was helping to develop a temporary access pass template that was adopted uniformly across the province so that we can gain that access back to farms and ranches when it's safe to do so. And the third step is what we're doing today, the third part of the project, which is helping to increase producer preparedness and resilience. And we're doing that both with individuals, like on the individual farm, but also with farm communities. And Reg will speak to the farm community aspect a little bit later. So that's all I'm going to say about our project. Now I want to talk about the emergency management process in BC. And like I said, it's really important to understand the context that you're working in, the whole scene, so that you can understand where your farm fits in the whole bigger picture of things during emergencies. So I'll go through this really quickly from the top down. So in BC, the whole system is based on the individual being prepared first. So they've taken responsibility for their place, their farm, their home, whatever. So it's the individual's responsibility to get prepared. But secondly, when there is a bigger emergency, that the local authority is the place where these emergencies are managed. So they control a certain jurisdiction, and the local authority is the lead, and everything else supports that local authority. And the way that happens is in BC, you have emergencies dealt with from the bottom up. I'll go through this pyramid first of all. So when you first have an emergency, you have a fire in your backyard, your barbecue lights up your gazebo, and now you've got a fire burning that's threatening your house and maybe some neighbors. Well, of course, you call the fire department if you have one, if you're in one of their service areas, and they come in, and that local emergency response is usually called an incident command post. It's something that's very local, and they're fighting the immediate emergency. If that fire spreads to more homes or into the forest behind this home and it becomes bigger, the local government might decide to set up an emergency operations center to manage multiple command posts. So now you've got the fire trucks working on the fire, you've got maybe a rescue center set up for the people that have to leave and be evacuated. You've got a couple of different things happening, so the local government might want to set up their emergency operations center just to coordinate and support those posts. And then the province, if they can have multiple local governments all fighting wildfires at the same time, and so they might set up their provincial regional emergency operations center, that third step, where they can bring the provincial resources and then send them out to the local governments to help them. And over top of all this, you've got BC Wildfire Service for when there's a wildfire, and they hit all of these spots. So they are kind of just outside that triangle and supporting the entire triangle. So that emergency operations center at the local government level, it's really important to understand that because that's really the interaction where the farming industry connects to this emergency response the most. So that local government emergency operations center, it's responsible for leading the response and recovery. They support people and businesses. They coordinate with their neighbors, with other local authorities, And one of the important things to remember is that it's usually staffed by local people. So when an emergency hits, they'll set up an emergency operations center. There usually aren't a lot of people that are dedicated to emergencies before that. But once you get your emergency operations center set up, then people leave what they do in their normal jobs and they turn their chairs around and they do something different to support this emergency operations center. And yeah, so and they'll bring in people locally as needed to address the emergency. So in BC, the province tells local governments what their prioritization needs to be. So the province tells the local government, your first priority is the health and safety of responders. Keep your first responders safe in all of your plans. That's your number one priority. The second one is to save lives. And then it goes down the list to the number 8 one, which is reduce economic and social losses. It's not that any of these are not important. It just means that the local government is responsible for prioritizing them in this order. And so if you're sometimes wondering why a local government is acting the way they are, and you think they should be, worried more about the economic and social losses, well, just understand that first of all, they have to look after some of these other priorities before they can allocate resources to ones further down. So that Emergency Operations Center has 4 different tools that they can use that come in the form of orders. So the first one is a tactical evacuation, and that happens when there's an immediate threat to life and there's a very high danger. This is where they knock on your door and they say, get out. It's time to go. The fire is right next door. The second level is an evacuation alert, which is basically a warning. They're telling you to get ready to go. It might happen. Start collecting your valuables, whatever. The third stage or third order is this evacuation order. And that's where they have designated an area that they think is dangerous for people to be in, and they really want you out of there. And then the fourth one is an evacuation order rescind. And that's basically canceling the other orders and just basically saying you can go back in. It's getting life back to normal. Now, there are certain things about when you have an evacuation order and you want to have access to your farms, the local government wants to allow that to some degree, but they do have some challenges, and it's important to realize that they are faced with these challenges. The first one is their first responsibility is to keep people safe, and that includes their first responders, but it also includes you. And so they're not going to be just letting everybody back in because they put that evacuation order in place for a reason. There is some danger there. Another challenge they have with allowing people back in is that they have to secure those residences. You've vacated your property. They have a responsibility to try to keep it secure. They also are liable for bad outcomes. If they make bad decisions or bad choices, they have to worry about the liability that they might be taking on with that. The fourth reason why they have challenges is it takes a lot of people to run a temporary access program. Everything from people to process the applications right through to the people at the roadblocks deciding who can get in and who can't. So it takes a lot of people, and people are one thing they're short of in the early stages of an emergency. They're using their local staff, that sort of thing. Determining the eligibility requirements is also a challenge. Who should be getting in and who shouldn't? And they're not agriculture specialists, so they don't automatically understand when you say you have an emergency need. The sixth thing is that they also struggle with their neighbors and their emergency temporary access policies, passes, permits. They have to make sure that they're consistent with what the neighbors are doing so that they're not letting somebody cross over their territory, give them access, only to come up against another roadblock where they can't get in. So they do need to be working with their neighbors on this. So there are all these reasons why it's a struggle, but there are also some really good reasons why a local government will often try to give you access during an evacuation order. For one thing, the risk isn't always uniform across there and across the whole evacuation order area. And so it might be relatively safe or safer to let you into your area. And so the risk isn't always the same. They also know that there's some critical agriculture infrastructure, whether that's a processing facility, irrigation, whatever. There's often some infrastructure that will really help later on with the recovery of the industry if they can keep it going or protect it now. Uh, Another big one that they're now responsible for is the animals that are left behind. So supporting animal welfare and relocation is another reason why they might allow temporary access. The fourth one, reducing the impact and to support recovery, is a big one because food security, the economic well-being of your region, they're all dependent on you being able to recover quickly after an emergency. And so sometimes allowing a little bit of access can really help later on after the emergency. Keeping track of who is where is really important. If they don't allow temporary access, chances are some farmers and ranchers will figure out how to get in on their own. If you have a system in place, you know they're in there. If you don't have a system in place for allowing access, you don't really know who's going to be in there because people have horses, they have ATVs. If the motivation is strong enough, they're probably going to get in. And finally, building that hope and trust, the two green boxes on our flow chart, getting to that sweet spot of everybody working together on a common problem rather than working against each other. So there are a lot of good reasons to have temporary access. I mentioned an agriculture coordinator before. These are people that represent agriculture in the Emergency Operations Center. They do a number of key things. They help that uh, Emergency Operation Center with just basic agriculture knowledge, knowing who the leaders in the community are, why the decisions they're making might be really impactful on agriculture or really good for agriculture, but just so that they have that agriculture knowledge to base their decisions on. They also are key to communicating with local producers, whether that's answering their phones, the phones from agriculture, or dealing directly with the local leaders. Uh, yeah, monitoring and advising on the impacts to agriculture. You know, if you put the boundary of your evacuation order here, it has this impact. You move it over half a kilometer and it totally changes the impact. So just so that the EOC understands that. And also, the agriculture coordinator often can be the primary contact back to the Ministry of Agriculture and all the resources they bring to the table. So as you're planning your plan for your farm, there are some things that you should be aware of, some tools that are aware of you should be aware of for building that plan. And there's six basic groups. So these are things that are available to you in planning, but also during the event itself. The first one is Fire Smart BC, and there are provincial local reps around the province, maybe not absolutely everywhere, but there's a lot of them around. So please go on their website, look up what resources are available to you and build that into your plan. Take some actions on Fire Smart in advance. The same thing with business risk management. That's a provincial program. They have provincial staff that can help you to judge whether there are some production insurance or other programs that you need to build into your emergency plan in advance. Premises ID, that's another provincial program. If you have any kind of agricultural livestock, uh, it helps the province and it helps the EOC to know where your animals are so they can include that in their planning. It puts you on their map when they're planning their actions. Livestock relocation, again, might not apply to grape growers, but if you have any animals at all, that's another consideration is the local EOC may facilitate moving your animals out of harm's way. So being aware of what the plans are is helpful. And again, we talked about access passes through the local government. So knowing what kind of a pass system or if there's a pass system being planned by your local government is very helpful. Industry developed and supported tools. A lot of farm organizations have tools specific to their commodity. And so check into those, make sure that you're using the ones that apply. I'll just quickly touch on these. Premises ID. It's a provincial program, as I mentioned, and it's now mandatory. It's very helpful to put your, like I said before, put your farm on their maps when they're doing their planning. Relocation options, build into your plan whether you're going to, whether you're planning to move your animals on the farm, relocate them to another farm, or just do things to protect them where they are right now. So again, these are things that have to be done in advance or should be done in advance so that you're not making it up as you go during an emergency. Temporary access passes, they are things that the local government can put in place, but they don't have to. So just be aware of what your local authority is planning during an emergency. And then industry developed tools, a lot of these have to do with livestock again, but the rancher liaison officer is something the BC cattlemen are leading on, and that basically puts somebody right on the ground with BC Wildfire Service to help them with animals on range, especially. Other livestock related industry tools, the range riders, livestock response unit, access to feed. Again, if you have livestock, look into those. The actual resources that help you build your plan, we've identified 4 key resources. There are many more, but if you start with these 4, you'll have a lot of really good resources to help build an emergency plan. The Ministry of Agriculture has some great tools, some templates. It's basically fill these in to start getting ready. Here are the things you need to think about. Climate Change and Adaptation Program also has tools and toolkits, industry associations, especially the cattlemen and dairy. The livestock people obviously have had to do more work in this area, but look into what is available for your industry. And then AgSafe. Reg will talk about some of those tools. The Ministry of Agriculture site, just shows you where you can easily click on some of these tools to put into action. And there are some specific guides there as well. And I'll let Reg talk about what groups of you can do together. So just in closing, what will happen next time? If we have more farms prepared, we can, and if we can get these ag coordinators positioned so that they're ready to act on day one, and if we have local governments ready to implement temporary access, we will be able to greatly reduce the time we spend in the red zone and more quickly move into that bottom zone and be working on the solutions rather than just fighting over the problem. So I just really encourage you to consider what you can do at your level to start preparing for an emergency. So with that, I will thank you and stop sharing and let Reg take over from there.
Well, thank you, Ken. And I'm hoping that we're good to go on the share here. I think we're screen up and ready to go. So yeah, thank you. The role that we have with AgSafe BC is unique, and it does not engage in things like Emergency Operations Center activation. So just to be clear, there's kind of 2 things at hand here. As a private contractor to AgSafe, I also maintain a number of other contracts as a range rider, as a person who works in an emergency operations center on behalf of agriculture. Have done that since 2017 when I was first called into a very trying circumstance in the Cariboo, where there was a tremendous degree of conflict on the land, and we came up with some solutions, and we began to work through some things that would work more effectively there. And that's been a bit of a process, which has gone through a number of transitions, including participation in these kinds of sessions and seminars now. And so just to be clear, the role that AgSafe plays and the role that I play as a private contractor are different at times. And so within my AgSafe capacity, I'll try to make that very clear, because that is common work to all of the AgSafe field representatives. And if it's different and it's over into the private consulting world of an EOC, then I'll try to clarify that as well. So quick word about AgSafe. AgSafe BC has been around since 1993. It was founded when there were regulatory requirements being incurred within the agricultural sector by WorkSafe BC. And so portions of the Occupational Health and Safety Regulations and the Workers' Compensation Act began to be applied to agriculture. And so agricultural farmers and ranchers said, well, okay, we're going to need an association that can help us with this. And so we're largely comprised of people who have health and safety experience. Some are stronger on that side and have some agricultural experience. Others of us are stronger on the AgSafe side. The agricultural experience that we have as people with boots on the ground in that sector. And so we have that as well as a health and safety background. So we're available to help you with the development of your safety program, primarily in the wine and grape area. We've got Kyle Hart over in one region and Ron Mack in the other, in the largest areas that would affect you. And so we're pleased to have them there. I've been with AgSafe for 25 years. I've been the field supervisor for 23 of those, and just recently handed that role over. So I continue as an AgSafe field representative and coordinator. I do consulting work in the Cariboo-Chilcotin area, and I'm the BC Ranch Safety Specialist. So on my private side of things, Buffalo Creek Consulting, and this is where I would enter into the emergency operations centers and actually take a seat in those rooms. I've done that since 2017 and have been in a good number of them every year, often going into them and helping an ag coordinator get started. And so that's been part of my role since 2017. I too want to acknowledge the financial support of the province of British Columbia, IAF, and others who have made this possible, and you as contributors to all of the government coffers. And so you are actually the driving force of any of these things. So thank you to you for being here and for being a participant. So what I would like to examine today is taking a look at a really clear understanding of the difference between a hazard and a risk. And if we understand that, then we will be able to manage ourselves and our situations in the variety of things that come our way, in the various ways that our farm or ranch might be impacted, and the various hazards that might be unique to our farm or ranch. Understanding the value of working in community and working together. I'll discuss preparing for an emergency and discuss some of the unique nature of things like temporary foreign workers. And then on my non-AgSafe side, we'll talk about reentry and some of the questions that you might have related to that. We do have some significant reentry documentation packages on our AgSafe website, and these were constructed. I worked with another individual from AgSafe to build these during the floods in 2021. And it was really challenging because there was no entry or reentry documentation that had been built for a safe reentry to such things. So we do have that kind of material available. One of the things that is absolutely paramount for us to do is to understand the difference between a hazard and a risk. If we do not understand this, and if we only ever react to the hazard, we will minimize anything that we can do, should do, could do, because we'll be responding to the hazard. So since we're kind of on a wildfire theme, we'll talk about wildfire, but if we understand the difference between hazard and risk, looking at the screen in front of you, and there's a fair ride kind of deal there. This one's from Knott's Berry Farm down in California. And if we look at this and we say, well, what is the hazard associated with a ride like that? And we could answer that by saying the hazard is you could die. You actually could die in something like this, because you could come flying off, it could collapse, your cart could cut loose and come off, your seat belts might fail and you might go flying out, a number of things like that. That is part of the actual hazard of a ride like this. However, it's the risk that we look at. And the risk of that is extremely low because of the engineering, because of the maintenance, because of the quality control, because of the training. All of those things counterbalance the actual hazard. So hazard, get on a ride like this, you could die. Risk, very low because of all of those things that I mentioned. So the same thing is true if we're discussing wildfire. So when we look at wildfire, there's a whole bunch of things around wildfire. We can't actually control what would be known as the hazard presented by a significant wildfire. The hazard would be that you could die, that fire can kill you in its massive potential when it has an out of control 400 feet high wall of fire moving forward. However, when we look at the risk and we manage this hazard according to the risk, it means different things to different people at different times. So for example, I might be in an evacuation order zone and I might be affected by the hazard in the sense that there's wildfire on the landscape. But the risk that I actually face if I'm 50 kilometers from that fire is very low. If I'm 2 kilometers, it's very high. So what that means to us as agricultural producers, it means, what do I do with my animals if I'm 50 kilometers away? What do I do with my crop if I'm 50 kilometers away and it's time to take the crop out? What do I do with my hay fields if I'm 50 kilometers from that fire? There's no sense saving a cow in June to have her starve to death in January. So can I safely get that crop off there? Can I create a fire break in this 200-acre hayfield that I'm about to cut? If that's the case, then logic would say that the hazard needs to be usurped by the risk management. And the risk would look at it and say, hey, as long as that fire is 50 kilometers away from me, I can do some of these things. If that fire is 1.5 kilometers away from me, totally different story. The risk has just accelerated. So when we look at the difference between the hazard and the risk, we need to make sure that we are making logical arguments, making a logical presentation, and holding to a logical position within an emergency operations center. So on my AgSafe side, I would say to you that we need to make sure that we recognize the hazards that are possibly those things that you are going to face, and our AgSafe field representatives will come and will help you do a hazard analysis of your property and identify those things. On the risk management side, we can look at ways that we might be able to mitigate some of those things. And those would include working with and through your fire smart person, making sure that you have some sort of preparation in place. And we'll talk more about that. But understanding that we want to respond to the risks that are pushed in front of us, not just the hazard. All of you will drive in the next day or two. The most dangerous thing that most of us as people do in this world is drive somewhere. We mitigate the risk by having a vehicle in good condition, wearing our seat belts, driving the speed limit, following the rules of the road, being a defensive driver, all those kinds of things. If we only responded to the hazard, fire on the landscape, we would do nothing. Driving, we would never go anywhere. But if we respond to the hazard by evaluating it through the filter of the risk management tools available to you, the recognition, the evaluation, the ability to control, reduce, or manage the risk, absolutely paramount in making sure that we can be effective as agricultural folks. When we start to talk about hazards, there's 3 things we want to look at. One is identify the issue. What is the hazard that you're actually facing? And that takes you to the concept of planning. And if if we plan to for an event, then we're going to minimize the amount of downtime in responding to that. So identifying what the problem is and how we're going to actually address that. When we do this, I like to look at the various types of emergencies that can beset an agricultural operation. And it could be something as simple as a lost or overdue worker. You've got somebody who went out to a field and you can't find them now. Or in my case, I range ride. I spend most of my time working alone out in vast pieces of rough ground on horseback. Having some way of somebody knowing if I've not returned is important. And so are some of these other things that we look at. So, for example, avalanche and landslides. In the Caribou Regional District last year, we dealt with a landslide, which was a significant event, had tremendous potential, but we had not actually considered how we were going to manage that within an EOC. And so that was a learning adventure. Other things that may be unique to different locations could be things like flooding, could be the extreme weather, animal disease outbreak. Do you live close to train tracks? Do you live close to a highway? What's in that rail car that just derailed by your property? And what is your plan to address that kind of emergency? That's a hazard that you face. What are the risks associated with a derailment, for example, and you have crunched up cars with something spilling into the environment? What is that? And how are you prepared to deal with that hazardous material release? Same with a vehicle incident on the highway. So knowing what kinds of hazards are specific to you is important. And this is a very effective thing that our AgSafe people can help you with. Provide that other set of eyes, come and take a look and see what exactly is the nature of the types of things that you might face. Many of them you'll consider, some of them you might not have. And so we can help with that. We often speak in terms of working together with people and developing community plans. And when we do that, one of the most challenging questions is the question around who is community, like who's in your community and who gets to be in that community response plan, and who's in, who's out, and who decides. And so when we break it down and we look at it and we say, okay, if we're forming a community response plan, so some of these things will be challenging in what we're allowed to do. So for example, how much can we engage with something like a wildfire? Can we effect an initial attack? And then if we have the initial attack, like we've got a half acre, or maybe there's a fire on the side of the road, somebody threw a cigarette out. Yes, they're still doing that, believe that or not. It's mind-boggling to me, but it might be something like that. And so can you affect an imminent and immediate response? There is a memorandum of understanding for initial attack in most of these circumstances, and having people who are prepared to do something with that tends to fall within the guidelines of that memorandum of understanding, which is certainly held between the cattlemen and the wildfire authorities, and it would apply to you as well. And that document's available on BC Cattlemen's website. And if you look for the memorandum of understanding there, basically it allows you to do an initial attack. And then when the wildfire people show up, you turn it over to them. We're finding after years of doing this that these people are actually coming alongside and saying, hey, great job, guys, mop it up here. We're out of here. We got other things to do. So there is that community that's being built within the community of your people and peer group and your agricultural sector, but also within the regional district and within the authorities, as we all increasingly try to work together safely, effectively, efficiently, and wisely. And so those are some of the things we do. So when you build this community plan, this is another thing that AgSafe will help you with your field representative. Often these are built off of things like a foundational group, perhaps 4-H, perhaps your association, as we have in our association. So my particular association is the Chimney Creek Livestock Association. And so that's the center of our call out and community plan system. We have other people from the community who've been added into that. So whatever we do as community, whatever we face, it really is better when we work together. And so when it comes to who's in, who's out, and all of those kinds of things, our approach has been find something useful for that person to do, find a way to include them, not exclude them. This works better at all levels, particularly just in the interface of community getting along and doing things together. So whether it's the capacity to respond to something like a lightning strike, or whether it's a lost or overdue worker, or maybe you had a barbecue Sunday afternoon and little Susie is not around, and you can make some phone calls and get your team out. So as a community, you want to know what you have. What do you have by way of your resources? And can that thing be moved? So it might be great to have a large cat, a bulldozer, but if you can't low bed it over to where it's needed, then it's not part of your response plan. So what are the kinds of things that would be? How do you communicate? How do you call out? And if you are in an imminent danger situation, have you thought about your fallback area? Like, where would you go? What would you do? So having those things in place well ahead of an event is a good thing to do. At this point, I just want to make sure that I don't gloss over the fact that it's important for us to be people who are prepared. And part of that preparation means that if somebody knocked on your door right now and said, you got to go, you don't have time to think about what you're going to take. So the time to do that is when you're sitting there and you're having a coffee with your family, your spouse, whatever it might be, your work crew, and you're saying, hey, if we got a tactical evacuation, like Ken addressed, the door is knocked on and an authority figure is standing there saying, you got to get out now. What are the things that you would reach for and grab? Have you got a little list that you could grab? And it might include things like your hard drive and other stuff. Have you prepared yourself for that situation, in that you might have walked through your house and done a video, so that if you did have a loss, are you going to be able to recover and recount everything that you had? And you now have verifiable proof that you might have 65 of whatever that the insurance company might say. Are you sure you had 65 of those? So something as simple as that, just walking through a narrated video on your phone that you can then say, here's all of my stuff. What are those things that you've done to that? I reference trigger points because trigger points are important. In 2017, we were making really large pieces of evacuation order, and a lot of them didn't ever get impacted. And so when the recommendations are made, the ideal now is that there's smaller areas that are being impacted. And often, certainly in the Cariboo Regional District, there'll be a recommendation for an evacuation order. And our people might look at it and say, okay, well, what if we just did this half now? And then we'll set up a trigger point. In other words, when X happens, this is what we do. When Y happens, this is what we do. When Z happens, this is what we do. So if the fire crosses this road, we then tip the evacuation alert to an order on the other half of the proposed order. So this has made it better, especially in things like wildfire, where the wildfire might change direction. It might have a successful backburn and not impose upon the second half of the order. So making order areas smaller makes them more efficient as far as putting it on and taking it off, and having the hope and trust that I've spoken of for 10 years in the establishment of hope and trust with our agricultural producers. It's essential that they have hope that you're going to look after them, and that they'll get to do what they need to do and be able to get back in as quickly as possible, and a trust that they'll only affect as little, as few people and as small an area as possible, so that when they put it on, they can take it off quickly. And so trigger points are a help with knowing when you're going to do some of those things and keep everybody safe, but keep it efficient and effective. This is just a big page of a model of a call out. Our particular call out system in the Cariboo here that we have at my Livestock Association is just a roll call list. Everybody's listed. Everybody has the up-to-date list. And if I was to say be the person who initiated the call, I would call the people underneath me. I would simply call until I got a voice. And at that point, I would pass off to them and go and start my response, whatever that might be. And so I would call, leave a message, call, leave a message, call, leave a message, get a voice, pass, and on you go. That's what we do. Lots of people do different things. It doesn't really matter. The goal is to make sure that people are able to know what's going on and that they are able to make some sort of a response or get out or do whatever they need to do. So AgSafe is specifically available to help you with the development of a community plan, able to help you with the regulatory compliance and documentation where applicable. So if you are a registered farm or ranch with WorkSafe BC, it is required that you have an emergency evacuation plan and an emergency plan. And we can help you with those things. Those documents are available on the agsafebc.ca website, agsafebc.ca. You'll be able to get those emergency. And if you get in there and you just search emergency, it will take you to every document that we've got. But one of the things that I really love to see is the use of our people in helping you with your hazard assessment. So this planning QR code, I'll leave it up there for just a second. This would take you into that emergency document and information part of our website, emergency planning QR code. As I say, if not, agsafebc.ca will get you there, or you can Google the specific document that you might require. So within, I won't spend a lot of time on these given the nature of our time, but these are templates for your emergency preparedness as required by the regulations. So that would be your evacuation plan and your emergency response plan and recording of the drills required as well. One of the things that is really key is that you understand what is going to happen in your area, in the jurisdiction that oversees you. I've been in many EOCs in my private side. This is not an AgSafe thing, but in my private side, and within those, understanding the differences that are very evident between one authority body, one jurisdiction, one regional government, and another, in their risk tolerance, in what they'll allow by way of a pass or permit versus somebody else's. So you need to understand what yours is going to look like and understand, in working with your regional authority, the policies and procedures that they have that they will put in place. And so, when you're preparing for these things, please consider so many of the hazards that might face you. And it could be fire, flood, missing person. It could be that toxic spill we talked about, all of those kinds of things. But don't get trapped into just thinking in terms of wildfire or flood. Are you prepared? And one of the things that we really want to make sure of is that people are prepared, that they have a consideration of the things that you're going to take with you or do, that you've thought through that list that I mentioned. And so if it's an alert, what are you going to put together and take with you? I won't spend a lot of time with this group on livestock, but livestock needs and movement, evacuation or movement of the animals within the region, which we've found in our large cattle dense area with big pieces of ground. Initially 2017, it was get all those animals out of here. And I said, well, as a working cowboy, we do that every fall and it takes us 6 weeks. So that's not going to work, but we can move them out of harm's way consistently. So in 2017, for example, with that philosophy, we lost 24 calves, and they had wandered back into an area and they had to be put down because they burnt their feet. But a neighboring jurisdiction lost over 4,000 animals due to the fire. And so our approach was more of a chessboard. We didn't even consider trying to get them all out of there because it just didn't work. So you have your unique challenges in your commodities and in your interests, but what are these things that you're going to do, and are you actually prepared? One of the things that I really encourage, in 2017, we discovered that it was hard to know where people were, and it was really hard for responders to know what to expect on their property. So I, for lack of a better term, invented these tubes. They're just a 2-inch PVC pipe with caps on the end. The sticker is reflective, and you can ask AgSafe or your field representative to get you these. You can make your own tubes, or you can put this on a metal box. The idea is that you would put within it a number of informational pieces, and there's a suggestion list that is on our website as well. Emergency Response Information Tube will get you to this particular document, and it just gives you some ideas that you can then put into the tube, so a responder would know, where are your major water valves? Where are that little bridge there? Will it hold? What's the GVW of that? Will it hold a fully loaded fire truck going across it? Where are the gates? So in my place, for example, if they wanted to get to a fire at the back end of the home property, if they know where the gates are, they'll go 200 yards to the left rather than cut the fence. But if they don't know, they're not going to search up and down the fence line. What are the triage preferences of your property? So if there is a threat to your property, say from wildfire, and you have evacuated, and they look at your buildings, they're going to go, okay, well, that's number one, we'll try to save that. That's number two, we'll try to save that. That's number three. So they do a triage. So if you've done that on your map inside this tube, you're going to make sure that they're trying to save the things you see as most valuable. Quick word on foreign workers. Bottom line is, if there's an evacuation order, they have to be removed from the area. At the time that there's an alert, you would consult with the consulate within your program, whether it's Wally or SOP or whoever you're with, but make sure that you have a plan. All temporary foreign workers must be removed from an evacuation order zone, and you need to know what you're going to do with them. The consulate will assist you with that once you make a call, because a worker is a worker until they're a TFW. And so when we think about that, we have to have a special plan, a head count, documentation that you've got them all. Where are they going? What are you going to do with them? So my challenge to you is to take away 3 things that you might do after this, that you might sit down and say, what am I going to take with me? If I had a tactical evacuation today, will I go home and consult with wildfire experts like FireSmart, or at least download their documents and do the checklist myself and try to make some things better? Will I consider where my TFWs are going to go, or do I have the contact information readily available? Wherever it might be, I will close by saying that there are things that we all can do, and it is a journey, and it's a step-by-step improvement approach. So I would encourage you to take away some things. Thank you.
That's awesome. That was awesome, Ken. Man, that's got the juices flowing, eh? Kate, I think probably the Wine Grape Council needs to address this and do some planning. I mean, it's things that I can think of are, what if the Narrometa Bench was blocked by a wildfire for days or weeks during harvest, right? What if you had wine fermenting in tanks, but you couldn't get to your winery for a week? I mean, as a winemaker, that's what I'm thinking of. Or looking after the vineyards, or if irrigation lines were cut for a whole area, right? Yeah. There's really a lot to think about, and in all areas, not just the wildfire area, right? Do we have questions? We have 1 minute.
If I could just, Kathy,
yes,
could
go
I just
ahead,
quickly
Ken.
address the one that came through the messaging?
Yeah, for Madeline. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. So that program, Premises ID, is specific to animal agriculture. However, it's animals, agricultural animals. So even if you have potbelly pig in Vancouver, by law, you're supposed to register it. But the key thing is, during an emergency, you want to have that key information available to emergency responders, whether it comes through Premises ID, from an industry organization, from a small group like Reg talked about. Like, how do you assemble that information and get it to that ag coordinator so that it's considered when you're actually in the EOC making these plans? So if they hear from the industry that here are all the winemakers and they've got a map, then they'll know, okay, these are on the map. If we put an evacuation order in, put up roadblocks, we have to consider this. And so it's not a one answer fits all. It's many answers for many situations. But the key thing to think through is how do we get our critical information into the mix for consideration by the responders?
I would offer a quick suggestion to that end. What would be really helpful, like the premise ID is really quite helpful to us, but I have, like in any EOC I'm in, I have big range maps and I know who's got what cows where and all that kind of stuff. I would suggest that if the council had a map that they had that showed who was where and that kind of thing, that if there was an EOC that struck it for your area, that you can get that map to them, and that is going to save those guys a ton of phone calls around, and you're going to know exactly who you're dealing with. So contact information and plotting of who's where would be just invaluable.
Well, yeah, well, we're working on.
I love that.
Yeah, we're working on our the acreage report. But yeah, it's a big job.
Yeah.
But this is for sure an added reason to do it. That's awesome. A lot to think about. As you know, we will post this video on our website. When I say we, I mean Kate. And so it will be available for members to view, and I think we'll sort of put our heads together as to what role the Wine Grape Council can play to sort of bolster up our preparedness. Thanks again so much. Thanks to everyone who joined us, and we'll see you next month. Third Thursday in April is the 16th. Bud break, maybe. Thanks again.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. And
Thank
if we
you.
can, if there's any way that we can be of help at AgSafe, just going to let Ron know. And if, or Kyle in particular, I know both of them attend your meetings. So, and I'm happy to participate with them in some sort of seminar or session if that's helpful. So,
Oh, yeah, we'll be in touch.
okay.